Okay, so it's day 2. And I want you to think about what we talked about yesterday with denial. We had that visual of this box of our head being separated from the rest of our body. Okay, so there's a point where that box settles in with the other shape of our body and starts to go, okay, this is real. And we have a lot of emotions about it. So the next phase I want to talk to you about, and again, it doesn't always go in order, is bargaining. Oh, this phase is so hard. This phase is a struggle because our brains, again, it goes back to that box, want to believe that we have way more control than potentially we actually do in life situations. Well, if I'd only done this, they'd still be alive. If this had happened, then I wouldn't have lost my job. If we had done this properly and did it in the right order, then we wouldn't have to make this move. We wouldn't have to do this change. If we'd worked on our marriage from day one, we wouldn't be divorcing. The bargaining phase is this ruminating phase where our thoughts go over and over and over. We play through the story, and it's almost like we want to traumatize ourselves repeatedly. Now, obviously, we don't desire that truly, but what has happened is we keep playing the story over and over and over. And I just want you to imagine, it's kind of like putting water on a sponge. We put a little bit of water on the sponge and we put another thing of water on the sponge, and it becomes saturated, and there's a point where it can't hold it anymore. Our bodies start to feel the weight of these ruminating thoughts, of this guilt, of this anxiety and worry and stress. And we start to feel things in our shoulders, in our backs, feel tension in our heads. Maybe we start to have digestive issues with insomnia. I know many who go through the phase of bargaining wake up in the middle of the night just feeling out of sorts, and their brain can't stop. Their brain can't stop thinking about the what ifs. What if I had done this and then everything could have changed? Now here's my theory on it. Sometimes we just have to respect that people make choices that they do, or that certain things worked out the way that they did. Yes, if we could control everything in the world, it probably would look really different. I know in my life, things would be much more settled, and there would be less of this roller coaster ride of things that happen. But I've come to accept that that's part of life. If I keep getting into this bargaining phase of if I had done this, then this would have happened, I miss out on how I can grow from what occurred. Again, like we talked about yesterday, there are times where we go through situations in which positive and negative things happen to us. It doesn't mean that we've done anything wrong or right. Honestly, sometimes it has nothing to do with us at all. It's just life occurring. But there's something inside of us, probably because of how we were parented, that we believe someone deserves to be punished. And something tells us that needs to be us. Sometimes we place the blame on other people, but often there's a point where we start to feel the guilt creep in on us. If you've lost a family member and you didn't get to talk to them beforehand or see them, you chose not to go visit on a certain holiday or birthday celebration, then you're familiar with this. Right after my second daughter was born, we had moved to Germany months before. I missed my grandfather's 80th birthday party. Now, we were in another country, and I was heavily pregnant, so it made sense. But there was this big guilt in me that I missed that huge celebration, and just a little over a month later, he died. I had to sit with that for a really long time. I also had to sit with the fact that we came home from the hospital with my daughter and didn't make the effort to call him or my grandmother. It was just so much. I was so exhausted. I was in a new country. I had a 2.5-year-old already, and I got this newborn that I just gave birth to in a hospital in a different country with a different language. And I just was overwhelmed. I didn't take the time. I had to sit with that guilt. And there was a part of me that bargained, well, if I had done this, then I wouldn't feel so bad. I knew I couldn't keep him alive. But I was afraid that had I done things differently, not necessarily afraid, but I was concerned if I'd done things differently, I wouldn't feel so guilty. Maybe that guilt wouldn't be on my shoulders. And it took my grandmother reminding me that we had sent an email right after our daughter was born with a picture of her and all the information, that they understood. They understood the challenges of living in a different country. She was from England. She moved to the States. She didn't have her family around when she gave birth. She knew that feeling of, I can't really connect and I can't be with my immediate family or my extended family because of this new life situation. They weren't mad at me. They weren't upset. And they felt connected even though I was afraid I had disconnected. Bargaining makes us think we have more control and more ability than we do. It makes us feel guilty for the choices we make. So if you find yourself in this phase or you know other people in this phase, remember some of it is respecting that someone's life path goes a certain way. We see this with suicide victims as well and their families. The choices that they make are hard for us to understand. And we get into the bargaining mindset of, if I'd only seen this, I could have helped. If I'd only done this, I could have helped. Same with addicts who overdose. If I'd really cared and stopped just ignoring their phone call, they'd still be alive. Sure, but when would be the point where they would have overdosed? What would have happened when, let's say, you're asleep at night and you're not awake for that phone call and you miss it, and then they still decide to commit suicide? Sometimes we have to respect someone else's choices for what they are, even if we don't agree with them. We have to remember we're one person in a bigger picture. And that bigger picture involves other people's life stories too. So when you find yourself in this bargaining phase, all the thoughts going and things, you're going to really want to focus on bringing that square connected back to your body and remind yourself that life happens. And yes, you're going to feel guilt, and that doesn't go away just because you tell yourself life happens. But you can start to soothe that with some forgiveness work. And you can start to calm your mind with reminding yourself of the things you did get to do and the things that you did have with that person. Or in the situations of having to move or losing a job, reminding yourself that sometimes we need that emptiness and that loss of something so that we can be filled or grow in other ways. You know, we don't get to have that new job without a job being gone, though many of us would love to wait for the new job to happen and then we apply to it. Sometimes that's not how life works. So remind yourself of what did come out of past times where you had a loss or a change or an adjustment, where bargaining took over, and then you later saw there was a purpose in this. If you'd like to share that below, feel free to, and I would love to be able to comment.